Good evening, friends. I would say it's been a while, but yeah. I just wasn't feeling good last weekend. I think it was like Thanksgiving or something because I'm not used to eating like that kind of food. And so I was just like not feeling well. And headache and everything. So anyway, enough about that. So I missed y'all. And I am glad to be back. Um, eh, there's there's been like some news, some not. Like I don't know how to say this. Like it's been somewhat of a busy news week. It hasn't been like crazy news week. Like the biggest thing though, I think, isn't necessarily like news for some people that I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to get into that yet. But today, two, well, I call them buddies of mine, especially Brian. Like Brian's like home dog. I consider him a home dog. Anyway, so today, two notable figures in alternative subculture, Brian Gropner and Jake Monroe, they went on Timcast today. And that was a very entertaining episode, as well as because like one of my all-time favorite like personalities showed up. Like I'm a huge Milo Yiannopoulos fan. I don't know if y'all ever read Dangerous. I've been through it, the audiobook, at least 6 times. Like I'm a huge Milo fan. I know that he like I follow him on X. He probably thinks I'm like super cringe. I don't whatever. Because like I'm in my 30s and I haven't grown out of my goth phase. So that's fine. I understand. But Milo showed up. So if you haven't seen the replay of the culture war, do so. And we'll get into some of what they talked about in a bit. But I do want to touch on some stuff that is going on in the news. And I kind of want to make this like a little different. Instead of me just going off about it, I kind of want to make this a discussion. And excuse the bare nails. So I want to make this kind of a discussion because it's so really controversial. Like you're either for it or against it, the way I see it. Now, what's going on right now is that Secretary Hegseth is what I've been saying. I would say he's playing Battleship. Is what I've been saying because he's sinking all these narco boats. Now I say he, like I'm sure Trump's calling a lot of the shots too, but he's a Secretary of War, so he's really in control of the missiles, right? And so he's sinking all these narco boats. Some people are like, yeah, do it. Some people are just like, no, there's some boats that, are just innocent people and this is like a war crime or whatever. I'm not whatevering war crimes. I'm just, So my view, okay, is that I like the government to spend little to no money. Okay, and I know they're not going to not spend money, unfortunately. But I like it when they spend the least amount of money as possible. And the government spends a lot of money on like the drug war and drug issues. Like once the drugs get here, especially like you have these local governments like San Francisco, which make like safe shoot up zones for people to, do drugs safely. Like instead of encouraging them to, get help, which of course the government's not going to do that. They want you sick, they want you fat, they want you lazy so they control you better. But the amount of money the government spends on like addicts, and I'm not hating on addicts. I understand you make the choice to do the drugs and then you get hooked and then it's just you're hooked. It's hard to get off of them. And I have, sympathy for that, sympathy for anybody that goes through anything like that. So I'm not hating on addicts, but the government does spend a lot of money on addicts and all that stuff. So the way I see it, and I'm gonna put the way I see it, and then I want to go to the chat and talk about it because I really want to see what y'all think about it. Because like I said, you're either for it or you're like super against it. So the way I see it is that the government spends so much money on addicts and on just the whole drug thing, I think it's ridiculous. Like, I think that the amount of money being spent to sink these narco boats is significantly less than they would be spending on somebody who needs to go into recovery or whatnot. So that's my point, is that it's the least expensive. Now, it sounds very expensive because there's literally people dying. Although these are probably people who would like anybody who crosses them. So they're not really people that have much sympathy for. Like, if you've been on the internet long enough, you've seen some pretty gruesome things that cartels have done. And I don't, like, they're not completely innocent, but they're still human lives. All right. So there's that view that I have. It's going to happen. People are going to do drugs. Drugs are going to come in. It's the way of the world. Okay. It's not sunshine and rainbows. It's reality. Drugs are going to come in. People are going to do drugs. But the amount of money spent on sinking these ships is significantly less than the government would spend otherwise. So, okay. Yes, I'm drinking coffee after 10:30 p.m. Okay, don't judge me. All right. So let's go to the chat and see what everybody else has to say. Because like I said, it's kind of a torn topic about the whole narco boat thing. Did you say Plague? Hey, homie. My mom and I were addicts. We're both clean now. My dad is still on the shit. It's not a disease. It's a choice, and one that makes you ruin both your and others' lives. That's my stance. Yeah, I actually have volunteered with addicts. I used to tutor addicts for their GED. So I've been around addicts. They're not bad people because they make bad decisions. Like, that's why I have more sympathy probably than the average person, because I have worked with addicts who are in recovery and trying to get their GED. I used to tutor them on math. Yes, I'm a nerd. So yeah, and I get, like, the whole libertarian thing about the war on drugs is bad. Yeah, like I am actually for the libertarian stance when it comes to drugs and the war on drugs. However, that doesn't mean drugs are good. Like, I don't smoke cigarettes, and cigarettes are, terrible for you. So it's like, you can have both at the same time. Something can be wrong for you and not good, and you could still be against, like, the use of it, but not for the illegality of something. Okay. +1 team copy, same here. Yeah. Okay. When you're on the stuff, you're not yourself anymore. Yeah, that's true. Even prescription stuff, even, like, say, I don't know how many people in the chat were diagnosed with ADD or ADHD as kids. Now, granted, that is doctor prescribed. When you're medicated as an ADHD child, ADD child, you're not yourself, and that's something that you're prescribed. So doing the harder stuff, whatever, like, those medications are pretty hard as it is. It's you can see firsthand how anything that alters you can definitely change who you are. How much do you support going against Venezuela? I do not support going against Venezuela because I don't want any wars. Period. That's not an America. Well, I'm not America first. I'm America only. All right. So, no, I don't support going against Venezuela. I don't support all this, I would say saber rattling, but it's more like dick sizing between Trump and the Venezuelan dictator. Granted, I'm not a fan of Venezuela. I'm not a fan of their government. If we were to go to war, of course I'd hope we come on top, because I'm not. I am patriotic. I love my country. I'm not gonna stand against my country, but I will judge the decisions of the leaders. Full stop. So, Going up to Venezuela sounds like a really, really bad decision. It sounds like just another war that we don't need. And it sounds expensive. It sounds just like, I don't know. It's horrible. Just the thought. Like I get he's a prick, but there's so many world leaders that are pricks too. And so many other countries that don't have a lot of freedom as well. So yeah. Terrorists, hey! Libertarians generally are soft on drugs because they consider a personal choice and they're only harming themselves. But what about the addicts, kids, and family? That is an arguable stance, uh, especially when it comes to like things that are legal, for instance. Like they say, if you're at home doing something yourself, like they try to say, like, let's just do alcohol, for instance. Alcohol is completely legal. Like the whole drunk in public thing, you're disturbing others, their liberties in a way, um, disturbing their peace, not necessarily drunk in public, but, like disorderly when drunk or whatever. Like if you can't handle your shit, stay home. But sometimes the addiction gets too heavy, too extreme, and it does start to affect families. And so, I'm completely against the use of drugs, like, period. Now, I don't consider things like medicinal stuff, like, because I've already talked about how I do use hemp medicinally for anxiety. I haven't had to in a while. I have some, but it's for if I need it. Okay, because I'm not a recreational kind of person. Uh, Now, as far as how it affects the families, you know, it's it is very sad. And the thing is that when it comes to how I view legalities, it's about the NAP, okay, the non-aggression principle. If you're not familiar, and is it considered a NAP violation to get an addiction and have it affect your family? It's traumatizing to the children. That's a life trauma that could arguably be a NAP violation. Now, granted, it's not really an aggressive thing, but you're still impacting them. So, there's arguments that can be said about that. So don't do coke, just chew cocoa leaves. Well, I don't have any cocoa leaves. Just unilateral control of all resources, not for America, but for the international combine. Talk about Venezuela? Because I just don't think we need to get involved. They need to stop sizing their dicks. Honestly, I don't want to see us get into any squabbles. He campaigned on being like no wars president, and like I don't really expect him to keep up to it because he's a politician still. I granted he's wasn't always a politician, but he has or served office at least once, so he's a politician now. So I don't expect him to really keep up with his promises on, you know, keeping to the whole no wars thing. Now, granted, the first administration, yeah, he didn't really get us involved in any like new wars, but this one's getting kind of sticky, and I I really don't like it. I saw one here that I want to bring up. Do you think Trump is worse than Biden? Biden was weakened at Bernie's. So, do I think Trump is better than a hollow shell? Yes. Because Biden wasn't coherent. He didn't know where he was half the time. So that's a given. Granted, like, I'm not necessarily happy with Trump. Like, yes, I voted for him. I don't regret it, but I am disappointed. However, it's one of those things where the alternative was too atrocious. And as libertarians, we did get some stuff. We didn't get enough stuff to really make us happy, but we did get some stuff. We got Ross freed. We got Doge, although it kind of fell through. So you win some, you lose some. But as a libertarian, you're used to losing some a lot. Oh, nice. Send pictures later. At least he doesn't fall downstairs. Don't jinx it. Don't jinx it. Because then that's going to be like the next TikTok thing where they're going to be like wishing all the worst stuff and not get banned for it. Ross freed, but that was it. Yeah, but Ross being free was a really huge deal, though. I'm not saying that we should sacrifice our country for 4 years for the sake of one man, but he didn't belong in there. And unfortunately, Kathy Hochul, is that her name? The governor of New York. Yeah, can't believe I can't remember his name. I think the coffee hasn't really hit. But she has a man jailed. It's like a Second Amendment violation, I think, the way she has him jailed. Somebody in the chat remind me of his like it's almost at the tip of my tongue, and then I can't remember his name. But he's in jail in New York for I think either 3 printing guns, or building his own parts or something. And they weren't like even illegal. He wasn't like in possession of anything that was crazy. Anyway, Kathy Hochul has him in jail, and that's just a complete violation of the Second Amendment, like for sure. Unfortunately, it's a state violation, so we can't get Trump to pardon him, although I wish we could. I don't know. I hate that I can't remember his name. I want to give him a shout out. This is someone that we don't need to forget. I can't believe I can't remember his name, but you know what? A couple weeks ago, I could not remember my own zip code for almost a whole week. Let's see. Kathy Hochul. Yeah, that's her name. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Hochul. Let's see. It is. It's not saying. It's just talking about New York's Orwellian gun control laws, which they've recently said that, or not said, but they're recently trying to charge a man in New York who shot someone he thought was mugging him. Like the guy actually was coming after him, and he shot him, and because it wasn't registered, he's getting in trouble. Like he could have been dead if he didn't have his firearm. So I don't know. New York is very, very Orwellian. Let's see, building guns. Who is his name? Probably not looking at the right stuff. There's somebody in the chat's probably named him already. Dexter Taylor. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm coughing in the microphone. Dexter Taylor. We do not need to forget Dexter Taylor. So Dexter Taylor is somebody that people need to rally behind a lot more, because it definitely is a Second Amendment issue with him. And but New York is very Orwellian, unfortunately. All right. So we got into the boats thing, and I don't think that it's I think there's more outrage on the left about the boats, the narco boats, than there is on the right. And the libertarians, of course, are like, there's some libertarians like Rand Paul. He's definitely very critical about it. So another thing I want to talk about tonight, though, is how alternative subcultures have kind of taken front and center here recently. In a good way. Yeah, I would say in a good way. Not in a bad way. So what's been going on is that everybody's aware of the whole woke bullshit, like everything's woke. Everything is like going to be like, if you're a certain skin color, you're always a victim. If you're another skin color, you're always a, perpetrator. You're privileged, and you got to affirm everybody for every little thing. So you got the whole woke culture. It crept into alternative subcultures. Now, of course, you have woke and left people trying to claim that that whole ideology really was a part of alternative subcultures the entire time. It really wasn't. Not like the attitude and the views in 2025 are not the same views that were around in like 1979. They're just not. You got bands like Susie from Susie and the Banshees. She was wearing like swastika armbands to be edgy, to push the limits, to just like, cause a ruckus. That's just how it was in the alternative subcultures. Now, you're doing your best to not offend anybody. If you offend somebody, your life is over. And if you are caught guilty by association with somebody that has offended somebody, your life is over. Just see Brian Grofner for that one. So, so did Sid Vicious. Yeah, he did. He also wore swastika armbands. And the thing is that they weren't Nazis. But see, nowadays, the woke is so dumb, is that if you were to do that, they would definitely be like adamant that you are a Nazi, even though you're just wearing to be edgy. Like, that was the way to be an edgelord back then. Nowadays, to be an edgelord, you go on the internet and like you start saying slurs, or as Jake Monroe says, hurling slurs. You start hurling slurs, to be edgy online, even though you're not really like a racist or anything else. You just do it to be edgy. That's how they were edgy. They didn't have the internet back then, so they wore swastika armbands, and that's how they were edgy. Didn't make them Nazis. But nowadays, you don't even have to have an armband or anything to be called a Nazi. You can just not support the left. You just have different opinions to be called a Nazi, which is like the stupidest thing, and is taking the meaning away from the word. And it's a pretty huge thing, Nazis and stuff, and to just kind of throw that around, it's I think it's absolutely reckless, because when you start to take the power of a word away, then it starts to make things super gray, and when they're gray, you can't really like, when something bad really does happen. It's like kind of like the boy who cried wolf, except it's the blue hair that cried Nazi. Prince Harry wore Yahtzee for him to apart, considering he was rich. yeah, Prince Harry is actually pretty punk, because he was definitely rebellious against his entire, like family and this whole title and everything. He's kind of lost his huevitos though. Anyway, so I really, all right. Let's roll on a little bit. So let's go back to what's going on. Talk about how alternative cultures would center stage, because I get on tangents all the time. Y'all know that. So today, Jake Monroe and Brian Grofner went on Timcast. It was on the Culture War. That's what there was. They were on the Culture War on Timcast today, and it was a very fun, very entertaining, great episode. Like, I've seen a couple Timcast episodes. It's by far my favorite, not just because a couple friends were on there, but because like Milo was on there. And Milo did a goth impression. He dressed up as Jake and wore the face paint and got X and everything, and it was just epic Milo moment, and that's gonna go down in Milo's greatest moments, I swear. So, uh, you know, they had a lot to say. And Jake really took a lot of, front and center on it because he's done a lot of research on this. He has been front and center in trying to depoliticize the goth subculture more specifically. Like I said, he's done his research. He has done a video I've already mentioned before. Goth is not political. Great video. After the stream, like not right now. Don't go watch it right now. But after the stream, go watch Jake Monroe's Goth is Not Political. It's amazing. I know it's almost an hour long, but he goes into so much detail on stuff that he's actually read books by people who were the founders of the subculture and the music scene. And they shouted out the Unicorn Queen herself. Yes, I did get a shout out. Thank you guys. I appreciated it too. Yes, I got a shout out. Not that I know the timestamp, 1 hour and 3 minutes. Anyway, so like Jake has done all this research, so he did like a bulk of the talking because he knew his shit inside and out. And there was also talk about the metal scene because obviously Phil Labonte, he's the frontman for All That Remains, and you got Brian there who is he was a quite a figure in the industrial scene, and then he got shit canned, essentially lost everything. And a big thing that he is I'm not sure if he actually started it. I know it was made in some way on behalf of him, but check out the band Crucifera because their leading lady made this group called Goths Against Cancel Culture, and that was brought up a few times in the stream. And what's crazy about this is that cancel culture ruins people's lives, just flat out. It does. Doesn't matter, what side of the aisle you're on. If you're canceled, your life is ruined. Okay? So she started Goths Against Cancel Culture group on Facebook. And it exploded with memberships. And it's almost like, oh, I thought I was the only one, because the whole woke scene has taken over so much of the subculture that people are surprised that there's like goths out there that aren't like woke assholes. But you don't kowtow the line, then you're canceled, right? Well, they not only canceled her, I think they canceled her before that, but she received death threats. Death threats. Imagine saying you're on the right side of history. Imagine thinking you're the good guy and you're sending death threats to a woman who makes a group about, hey, let's not ruin people's lives over mistakes. Like, what kind of cognitive dissonance does somebody have to think they're the good guy sending death threats for that kind of stuff? It makes no sense, first off. So they brought up the Goth Against Cancel Culture, which, I am in, if you want to join. It's a great group. And how the left has really been upset about it. They say, oh, it's a right-wing dog whistle. They say that for everything. You push back on anything they have to say, something that is legitimately horrible that they do or that they say, anything horrible on their side, you criticize it, and it's a right-wing dog whistle. And it's all about fascism. That reminds me of the whole, like, the goth subculture, or goth subreddit, sorry. The goth subreddit has a list of problematic bands, and it is absolutely hilarious. Some of them are just like, there's a David Bowie song, or they say the music video. It's because it says he makes Chinese eyes in the beginning of the video, so it's a problematic video. Just throw the whole subreddit away. So, they went on and discussed why and how the left was able to hijack these subcultures. Because, alternative subcultures are meant to be alternative, meant to be people who are rebellious, people who feel like they don't fit into society, people who feel like they're different, people who just happen to like different things and gravitate towards different things. And that's basically the basis of it. That was why these subcultures came about. It was to escape from societal norms, because either you feel like you don't fit with those, or you have a gravitational liking to other stuff. Like, for instance, I love Edgar Allan Poe. Not everyone likes him. Some people think he's pretty macabre. I love it. I love his stuff. And he's considered part of Gothic literature. So they went into that. And so what the left has done, the left has always tried to do, especially once the whole communism, the social communism thing, the social Marxism, once that came in about, what Marxism does is it pulls on your heartstrings. It tries to say, oh, you're like before it was the proletariat, you're being oppressed by, the bourgeoisie. And then that didn't work. Okay. So now it's, oh, minority, oh, LGBTQ, oh, female, you're so oppressed against, this and that. So the left targets the people who do feel different, who do feel in a way left out of society because of X, Y, or Z. And that's the same kind of people who usually were attracted to alternative subcultures. So they kind of seeped in, because in a way, the way they got their following was very similar. So a lot of people have intertwined them and just kind of locked them in as one. But they're not. They're completely separate. You can have goth completely independent of politics. There's nothing political, nothing inherently political about Gothic literature, Gothic art. Look at there's Gothic cathedrals, all right? A lot of the aesthetic even comes from things like that. Those Christian symbolism, So there's not, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense how they're really trying to, at least pulling goth, because goth does take a lot of Christian symbolism too, and in the aesthetic and the arts. Mary Shelley was a major devout Christian, and she wrote Frankenstein, one of the biggest pieces of Gothic literature out there. And of course, with the movies and stuff. And I don't see how somebody can look at could even read things let's see, what's another one? I don't know, I'm not for instance, Anne Rice, I would consider that in vampire kind of Gothic literature, not really the classics. How can somebody look, or just let's go back to Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know how somebody can look at Edgar Allan Poe, read The Raven, okay, and just think about, oh, the plight of the minorities and the Palestinians, and just get anything left out of that. Well, it's independent of it. Even the creator said that it was made as an escape. Oh yeah, here's a. You know what? I'm a huge vampire nerd. I didn't even think of that one. Yeah, Dracula by Bram Stoker. How can you try to get any kind of political stuff from that? And the thing is that, and I'm bringing the literature up because the literature influenced the arts influenced the music. Now they say goth is just a music subculture. Yeah, well the music was inspired by and was heavily influenced by these arts, by these literatures, by these even like cathedrals and just there's like aesthetics that they would see and poetry and actual like physical art. What is inherently talking about classism and struggles and oppression and wokeness? There is absolutely nothing to relate the two in that. But if you bring that up to like a wokey, like a coggy or whatever, they're gonna like move the goalpost. That's what they do. That's why they have like the biggest cognitive dissonance. That's why I call them coggies, because they don't understand that they can be political. I obviously am. It's in my name, right? They can be political and they can also be alternative. Okay. Just because they put so much of their identity in one thing doesn't mean that the other part of them is also the same. I don't think I made sense of that. Okay, so I'll just use myself as an example here, just because that's the only kind of thing I say. I'm libertarian. That is my political ideology. I'm not political party, although I hang out with them here. They're like cool people, but I'm a libertarian. I have goth in my name, but I just see myself as alternative, whatever, And that's me. Okay. Yes, my political views make up a lot of me and my attitude. So does my style and like my attitude of other things, my interests. However, just because I happen to have libertarian views and also like things like Poe, gothic bands, and not have a huge obsession with Villa Vallo, just because I have that, does it mean that my political stuff is onto the goth subculture? Does that make any sense? They are all right, listen here, you little shit. Anyway, it doesn't make them one and the same. Your own identity can be different things. Just because I have my name as libertarian goth doesn't mean that they're one and the same. One is a description of the other, because one is not political. One is who I am. The other is a description of me politically. They're not one and the same. And the thing is that people put so much stock now in identities that they have to affix their identity onto everything that involves them. And if you don't agree, you're either erasing them, or you're wrong, or you are just you're some sort of bigot. But no, I don't care how people want to exist. Okay, I don't care how people want to exist. Don't tell me that the other half of me, that the liking of the macabre, the liking of the dark poetry and the romance and stuff like that. Don't tell me that just because that exists as something that I like, I have to lean a certain way, that I have to be for bigger government, that I have to be for free healthcare for all. Although, who would really want the government to run the healthcare? Honestly, really, the DMV is terrible enough. Really? Anyway. Tribalism is the currency of the realm. Yeah, and that's what's really kind of fueled a lot of it, is the tribalism in alternative subcultures, and especially within the left. The people, the radicalization of the youth. Jake actually talked about that briefly too. After the youth got radicalized, and I think it was around I forgot what year. I think he said 2013, but I really feel like the youth started to become more radicalized at the end of Bush, or especially when people started getting Iraq war fatigue. I think that's when the youth started to get radicalized. Because celebrities more were talking out about it. Celebrities more, and you have people who can't really think for themselves will follow celebrities to anything. And so when the youth started getting radicalized, it would start getting, more and more radicalized. Now, while the left appeals to the youth because the youth doesn't have any kind of life experience. They don't know that, you put the government in charge of something is going to raise taxes, and that, everybody's got to pay the taxes. Like, you try to charge the rich in the city more taxes, they're going to leave. Like, some of these things don't, like, they don't pop up in their heads. They don't comprehend some stuff. They just like, oh, we all should have healthcare. It's a right. Well, the thing is that healthcare cannot be a right because it requires the labor of somebody else. So then you're either advocating for slavery by saying healthcare is a right, or you acknowledge that it's not a right and that the government should stay the fuck out of it. It makes premiums go up. So anyway, a little tangent. So just because, I like this stuff, I wear this stuff, why would I have to think that we should have healthcare for all? Why should I have to think that, people should be obligated to say certain pronouns that people want or be jailed for it? Why should I, be for, like, what else? What other kind of dumb shit are the left for? Why should I be for, like, even a universal income? Why should I be for a universal income? What part of all of this, and the music, I'm not gonna play the music because it's copyright. All of that, what part of all of that screams like, yay, socialism? It doesn't. They're the goal is, and this is Jake's goal as well. This has always been my goal from the start, is to take that bastardization of where they intertwined the subcultures with politics and just pry them apart. Yes, I keep showing you my bare nails. I'm sorry. They're ugly. And just pry them apart because they used to be fun. You used to be able to go to, like, whenever I was like in my early 20s, late teens or so, I used to go to this club in Nashville. It's a goth club called Salvation. It's a lot of fun. And you go there, you hang out with your friends. You don't sit there and talk politics. That's just not what comes up. You listen to music, you dance, you have some drinks. That was just what you do. You just, it was an escape. It was an escape. You go there after work and you're just like, this is an escape from, like, my day, from real life. Let's talk about movies. Let's talk about music. Let's talk about something besides what's going on in the real world. Let's talk about things that are escapes from the real world. Because the world is dark. The world is tough. So why are they trying to interject real world issues into things that are supposed to be escapes? It's because they put so much identity in it and they just carry it around in them. But now they've sucked all the fun out of these subcultures because they are adamant that, there's politics behind it. What they're trying to get at, trying to say that the goalpost that they're moving is, so they're saying, oh, well, goth came from punk. Goth came from post-punk. All right. And it was the sound of music. Musically, it was the sound. It wasn't like goth came from punk in the sense where it was all about the politics and attitude. Goth put that aside. Goth was all about the arts. It's a dark, romantic, macabre sort of thing. Yes, punk, wasn't even necessarily you almost say punk wasn't political in the sense where punk was a rejection of politics because it was absolute rebellion. So any kind of rules to punk, which we went over a few weeks ago, is asinine because punk was about pushing the limits, doing whatever you wanted, and pissing people off. It was the antithesis of like the middle finger to society. That was punk. Goth does not have that same attitude. It just doesn't. There's nothing inherently similar about the two. They took the sound of the music. Okay? And you'd even argue that goth is older than punk in some sense. Depending, like, if you're one of those purists that say it's only about the music, then you're not going to agree with me, period. But if you open your mind up at the fact that, all these gothic literatures are from like what? I think Poe is from like the 1820s, if I'm not mistaken. And, 1800s. Okay. Most of it is from the 1800s. If you want to argue that, that's whenever the whole, goth kind of started in a way, like was starting to become a thing, but starting to formulate. You could argue that. And then definitely, goth is definitely older than punk. Because they're so separate. But yes, they're both alternative subcultures, but they're so separate. So then trying to pull the whole, well, because punk is political, then goth has to be political. That's not the case, though. Grunge is technically punk. Yeah, it was kind of like a 90s punk in a way. Like I like some grunge metal, like Acid Bath, of course. Musically, goth / post-punk took the stripped down ethos of punk, but owes just as much to musicians like The Doors, Velvet Underground, Nico Coven, and many garage bands. Yeah, it's raised on The Doors, and I still do love The Doors. And if you read Jim Morrison's lyrics, they are quite like poetic, macabre, and they look like they would be very heavily goth inspired. So I would definitely not doubt that the goths were inspired by The Doors, because there's so much that built up to the era of the OGs, the OG goths. Okay. A lot of things that they took inspiration from, things that artists still take inspiration from. And, the way I see it, I feel like the subculture has just evolved in like eras. Like there was the millennial goths of the early 2000s. There was like the goths of the 90s, and like the mall goths and stuff. That was usually a lot of the 90s ones. If it wasn't the mall goths ones, it was like the typo negative ones that wore like the black lace and like started doing like the corset and the Victorian thing. Because if you look at the 80s goths, the 80s goths usually had like they wore black, and they wore like a lot of like necklaces and such, but they would have like the big hair. So the subculture, like the aesthetics have evolved. The music has definitely evolved. If some people hate the term goth music, I feel like it's a gray area kind of umbrella, because there is I feel like there's goth industrial, there's goth rock, there's there's the OG kind of sound, which I feel like that was the great granddad of industrial, personally. Some people might not agree with that, but I'm putting that distance, though, like a great granddad of industrial, because of the whole electronics thing. Because the 80s, the sound of the 80s music was very heavily electronic. And what is industrial? Electronic. So it definitely is not the same sound. But if you listen to stuff like I don't know if anybody in here if you follow me, you've seen it on my timeline. Julian K, which is made by two founding members of Orgy. Julian K, they have some very OG goth inspired songs. Their newest album, like there's a song on their newest album that was just it really reminded me of something that you would probably hear like in the 80s goth clubs. The sound the song is called Shadow Life. So if you want to check out their album, that's the album. It's called Dark Mode. Okay, it's a good album. Shadow Life really reminded me of that old flavor. And then you have bands like Kaylin Mikla, who, you know, sing only in Icelandic, who still have that full synth sound that a lot of the OG stuff did. So I really feel like what's considered, quote, goth music, there's umbrellas for it because they all kind of have the same themes. There's always the same theme at the root, but the sounds can differ. Okay, there's always a macabre element to it in some way, a dark element, a poetic element, you know, I would say negative feelings, you know, like grief and loss and guilt. There's always that kind of feeling a lot in these, what I would consider to be like goth bands or groups, but they don't sound the same anymore. It's really evolved. So sound-wise, it's evolved. Aesthetically, it's evolved because you have like your cyberpunks and you have like your Victorian punks, you have casual punk or punks. I'm saying punk. I'm in goth. You know, you got so many different aesthetics going on with like attire, and then you have so much different music going on. So I really feel like it's just evolved. It's just evolved, and there's just like a like an umbrella of what's considered goth or gothic. Honestly, some people are so strict with goth versus gothic. I just use it interchangeably because it's just easier. I'm not going to get into semantics. So like for instance, like the band Him, my favorite band. Okay. Some people say they're goth. Some people say they're not goth. Read their lyrics. They're pretty. I don't know. Villa Bello might be the reincarnation of Lord Byron for all we know. All right. So I consider bands like Marilyn Manson and Him to be goth, but if you tell an elder goth from the 80s that, they'll have a conniption. Well, because that was the goths in the 80s, that was their era. So yeah, they're gonna object. They're gonna object to it, which I understand. I'm from the era of like Evanescence and Him and the Rasmus. The era I'm from, like, people argue about Evanescence, you know, like, oh, they're mall goth or whatever, or they're not goth or just alternative. Yeah, they are, but they still had an influence on the goth subculture, regardless of what they actually are considered. They still had an influence. And, you know, a lot of that was goth rock. It wasn't like, you know, much synth. Granted, Him does a lot of synth, because, you know, they kind of have like a typo negative Depeche Mode kind of thing going on. But yeah, the elder goths of the 80s are very protective of the scene of their era, which is fine. They can be. I'm not going to argue with them. You know, if that was the era that, you know, they identify with as being, you know, it, then fine. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue with anybody from the 90s who says, no, it was, you know, it was completely different. Like, you have like movies from The Crow, which kind of showed like a goth couple. Eric and Shelley were definitely, you know, a goth couple. And like, you have that. If you're from the 90s, you want to argue that? All right. I'm not going to argue, because the subculture has definitely evolved. But what it hasn't been is political. Yeah, so all that rambling just to get to that, it's not political. All that evolution. I went on a tangent talking about the entire subculture, the evolution of it, the music. What did I not have to mention? Anything political. Because it wasn't. And it isn't. It's just not. I can talk about music, movies, the arts, the literature for hours with somebody else within the subculture. And politics won't even have to be brought up once. But nowadays, as soon as you meet someone from the modern subculture, they ask you your pronouns. I'm sorry, if you can't tell by looking at me, then that's kind of insulting. Anyway, so we are at the end of the show. I have had quite a fun time tonight with y'all. Appreciate y'all. We always go on tangents in here. It should be the alternative tangent, honestly, because, yeah. But I hope I got the thing across. And again, if you haven't seen the Culture War that aired today, Timcast, with Brian Groffner and Jake Monroe, go see it. It's a great episode. You can learn a lot too, because like I said, Jake has done his research, and in the Milo, even if you just watch for the Milo like appearance, it'll be worth it. But I do want to take this time to do something that I always forget to do, which is tell you to like, subscribe, share, notification bell, all that good stuff that they try to say, oh, you need to do this. You see all of them do say, yeah. It's not like I'm like posting like a million stuff a day. I don't have the time or energy for that. I'm a once a week streamer. So that notification bell, you're probably only getting on Friday nights. Okay. So go ahead and hit the notification bell. If you're on YouTube, I don't know if Rumble does the notification thing. But yeah, like, subscribe, share. If you know anybody that likes to, talk. Oh, wait. Hey, that's not it. There you go. Where's your sponsor? I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Okay. So we don't want to leave out the sponsor for today's show, which is I'm gonna tell you, I didn't have it up already. Slacking. There we go. All right. So today's sponsor for the show is libertariangoth.com. It is the internet's largest alternative geared liberty apparel store. Where else can you get a cyberbully the government in black metal lettering? Not where. Only here. You're getting jackets and shirts. I also, by popular demand, also have pinups. I have the 2026 pinup calendar, which, they're not in reach right now, which I haven't sent out yet, because what I do with them is that on the birthdays, I put like a lipstick kiss on the birthday, but my lipstick dried up that I used for that. So I had to order another one. So I'm waiting for that to come in. So yeah, I haven't sent them out yet. Trying to finish jazzing them up. But as soon as that's done, they're going to go out. But yeah, the Liberty Trap calendar, instead of Thirst Trap, okay? Instead of Thirst Trap, I am not a trap, but instead of Thirst Trap, it's a Liberty Trap. That calendar is out. And for the rest of the year, the 2025 calendar is $5 off. So if you want to get it before December ends, go ahead and get it. $5 off. Otherwise, it'll be gone forever. And that, I think that one's better than this year's. And I shouldn't be saying that because I'm trying to sell this year's. But I can't not be honest, really. Oh, yeah. And then if you click there where the calendars are, that banner, you can also go to some of my pinup stuff, like canvases and posters and shirts and stuff. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, I have magnets. So if you want me to, like, be on your fridge with a Bastiat quote staring you down, then, yeah, there you go. There's a magnet. And also, I just want to point out these as well. These have been popping off lately. The Make America Goth Again hats. They are in trucker, snapback, and dad hat and beanie. They are awesome. I have the trucker hat. Obviously not wearing it tonight. So yeah, check it out. Libertariangoth.com. That is something easy to remember. So yeah, that was today's sponsor because I don't have any actual sponsors. I am my own sponsor. But this stream is not cheap. So if you want to become a patron for my Patreon or a sponsor on, or not a sponsor, or a subscriber on X it's only $2. I forgot what the minimum is on Patreon. Patreon gets more pinup photos that I did not put in the calendar or have in the store. So I don't really post on Patreon a lot, but what I post is pretty good. But if you want to subscribe, $2 a month, that's all it is. And you also get to have extra privileges in my Discord channel, which is in my link tree in my bio on X. So head over there if you want. It's a pretty cool group, pretty fun group on my Discord. I I won't get into that, but anyway. So I hope y'all had fun tonight. I hope that y'all check out the Culture War Timcast, and make sure you always lead with kindness, unless they don't deserve it.